Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to be talking to you about subtracting decimals. A couple of things we need to point out to you before we get started here. A couple terms you may hear come up, which is difference, the first one. That is the fancy term, the fancy mathematical term for simply the answer to a subtraction problem or the solution. To estimate, sometimes it can be a little bit easier to estimate an answer when dealing with decimals. So basically to calculate a decimal based off of the rounded whole number. So we may be asking you to round, which I'll point out right now how to do that. If you look at the bottom here, 26.53 rounded is 27. The reason why I know that is because in highlighted in red right there, if you're rounding to the nearest whole number, as you can see, the nearest whole number, which would be not a decimal, the nearest whole number would be the ones place in this case. If you're rounding to the nearest whole number, you look at the next place value. The next place value would be the tenths place. If that value is 5 or higher, you round 6 up to 7. If that value is 4 or lower, you would just simply keep it 6. Okay? So in this case, notice we have 45.32. In this case, you're actually going to just keep that 45. And that was actually that other situation I just mentioned. Notice if we're rounding this to the nearest whole number, which is the 5, we look at the 3. Okay, and since it's below 5, we don't need to change it. We don't need to modify it. We're going to round it down. And the reason why you would do this is to just quickly do some mental math. If you have decimals, a lot of decimals, and you don't need to be accurate, you can really do some quick mental math with it by simply using basic rounding. So let's take a look at some examples here. And we're going to start with some estimation. 985.26 minus 552.54. So before I rewrite these problems and we get to subtracting, let's figure out how we would round these. Let's start with 985.26. If I'm rounding these to the nearest whole number, again, the first whole number before we go into decimals is always the ones place. So I'm going to be looking at that value there and the next number. So 985.2, okay? 0.2. That 2 tells me that I actually will just simply leave it 985 to estimate because 2 is less than 5. So when I rewrite it, it's going to be 985. Looking at 552.54, again, this is the number that needs to be modified possibly depending on what this value is here. Now notice this time it's a 5. Since it's a 5, numbers that are 5 or higher make this value here, the 2, go up 1 digit. So 552.54 will now become 553. And that allows me now to go ahead and subtract. Nice and easy and quick. So 5 minus 3 is going to give me 2. 8 minus 5 is going to give me 3. And 9 minus 5 is going to give me 4. So my estimated answer is 432. All right, let's take a look at one more. Excuse me. Estimate the subtraction. So again, notice this one goes out 3 digits after the ones place. Again, that's not really, it's not necessary to pay any attention to that. Really, all we need to look at is the 9 and whether or not it needs to be modified. Now, the key to this one is what's higher than a 9? Well, the next number up. If we would usually just jump into the teens or the 20s or the 30s depending, and that's actually what you will do here. Since this number is a 6, that means we need to round it up. So because 29 is right at the end of the 20s, what do you suppose we round it up to? The next tens, which would be 30. So we're going to round 29.678 up to 30. So that 9 actually gets rounded to a 0, and then you need to basically carry the 1 over because it would be 10, carry the 1 over and make it a 3. Jumping over to the other value here, we have 4.79. Okay, so 4 is the number we would be changing if this value here is higher than 5, or 5 or higher, I should say. In this case, it is. You're looking at 7, so that means you need to round your 4 up to 5. And you can see this makes for a nice, easy subtraction problem at this point. 30 minus 5. If you're not sure, do your borrowing. That would make the 3 a 2. Carry that 1 over that you borrowed. You get 10 minus 5, which is 5. And then 2 minus 0. So you end up with an estimated solution of 25. All right, so let's go ahead and take, if they want you to be more accurate, especially if you're dealing with like money, people want you to be accurate with money, and that's usually when you're going to deal with decimals the most, at least in real life situations. People don't want you to give incorrect change, things of that nature. So you're going to need to be accurate. So let's take a look at how we would actually subtract all these decimals. Our directions here say find the difference, which means find the answer to the subtraction problem. Right? I'm always going to write the larger number on top and subtract away, in this case, the second number. All right, and down at the bottom you can see I've put a little hint here. Be sure to line up your decimals. Okay, notice how I've lined up my decimals so that they're directly above and below one another. That is important because you need to make sure that you're actually subtracting the correct place values. Because what you're actually doing is lining up place values so that you're not actually subtracting tens from ones or hundreds from tens, because that'll mess everything up. So once you get everything lined up appropriately, you can go ahead and start subtracting. So 9 minus 9 is going to give us 0. 8 minus 5 is going to give us 3. Bring down your decimal straight down. We need to borrow because you can't subtract 6 from 2, which would make that a 2 and this a 12. All right, so 12 minus 6 is going to give us 6, and then 2 minus 1 finally gives us 1. So your final answer here, or final difference, would be 16.30. All right, another one here. This time you can see that I've put together an example where you have multiple, or more I should say, place values. You got to be careful of that. Make sure that when you rewrite this problem, when you're setting up your subtraction, when you rewrite it, that you include the same number of place values for both numbers. So for instance, when I rewrite 482.5, I need to take that out to the same number of place values as the other value, or as the other number. Notice it goes out to 3 decimal places. 482.5 is only 1 decimal place, so I need to take that out to the thousandths place as well. Then I'm going to line up all my place values. So 265, line up my decimals, 3, 2, 8, okay? This is a perfect example that can get really messed up if you don't remember to include your place values by holding them with zeros, or if you don't line up your decimals. So once you do that, though, you're good to go as far as subtraction. You can see you're going to have to do quite a bit of borrowing here, which is fine. We're going to start by borrowing from the 5, which makes that a 4. That would make this next number a 10, but we need to borrow again. So it actually would become a 9. And then finally we have what would be a 10 now. So 10 minus 8 is going to give us 2. 9 minus 2 here is going to give us 7. 4 minus 3 is going to give us 1. Bring your decimal straight down. All right, so 2 minus 5 we can't do without borrowing, so we're going to borrow from the 8, which would make it a 7. All right, that makes the 2 a 12. 12 minus 5 is 7. 7 minus 6 is 1. And 4 minus 2 is 2. So you end up with a final difference of 217.172. All right. Word problems. Just a couple word problems here to show you how they would relate in that context. In this case, I'm doing a little tutoring. I made 232.56 on Monday and 135.98 on Wednesday. What's the difference? So again, when they say what's the difference, that's the key that you're going to be subtracting. You need to look for words like that. So if they said what's the sum, you would add. What's the quotient, you would divide, and things of that nature. So in this case, we're going to set it up, lining up our place values as 252.56, the larger value over the smaller value, because we're not dealing in negatives. If we don't do that, we're going to end up with some negatives, and we're not quite there yet.
You wrote the number wrong.
Oh, did I? Oh, I did. 252.
Just start back with this slide.
Sure. Thank you. I get on a roll and didn't even pay attention to it. All right.
And 3, 2.
Now we'll take a look at some word problems and how you'll be using subtraction of decimals in that context. You can see in this problem that I've been doing some tutoring on Monday and made 232.56, and then I've been tutoring on Wednesday and made 135.98, and they want us to find the difference. So to do that, you're going to write the larger of the two values on on top, so 232.56 on top, and 135.98 on bottom. And again, you do that now because we're not dealing in negatives quite yet. All right, so make sure you have all your place values lined up, your decimals lined up, so that everything is being subtracted by what it's supposed to be subtracted from. And then go ahead and get started. So first of all, we would have to start by borrowing, because we can't subtract 8 from 6. That's going to make the 6 a 16. 16 minus 8 is 8. All right, so we're going to end up having to borrow one more time from the 2, and that's going to make that a 14. 14 minus 9 is going to give us 5. Bring your decimal straight down. All right, borrowing once more. Lots of borrowing in this problem. Making the 3 a 2 and the 1 an 11. 11 minus 5 is going to give you 6. Right, and then one more time we got to borrow from the 2, which would make that 2 a 12, and 12 minus 3 is going to give us 9. So our final solution as far as the difference is concerned is going to be $96.58. All right. Moving to the last example here, we're just looking at the difference in distance. Very popular type of problem here, especially with decimals. The distance from John's house to school is 8.92 miles. The distance from Kara's house to school is 18.5 miles. How much further of a drive does Kara have than John? So again, we're going to look at finding the difference here. 18.5 minus 8.92. But again, notice how 8.92 has 2 decimal places and 18.5 only has 1. So we need to take 18.5 out to the same number of decimal places and then line up those place values. Just like so. Once you do that, then you're good to go as far as subtraction is concerned. All right, so now we're going to borrow. And that would give us 10 minus 2, which is 8. Borrow one more time, which is going to make the 4 14. 14 minus 9 is going to be 5. We got to borrow one last time. 17 minus 8, and that's going to give us 9. So there's a difference in 9 miles and 58 hundredths. All right, that's been a quick tutorial on how to subtract decimals. Thank you for joining me.